All right, welcome to Greiner's In Practice session. We have Steve Cramer here with the Downtown Council. We're going to talk about what the Downtown Council is up to, how the leasing market downtown is being affected, and what its future looks like, and also how each and every one of us can help end homelessness in Minneapolis. So thank you so much, Steve, for joining us. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Just a few questions to get to know you. I read, I don't know if this is true, but it was on a LinkedIn bio, I think, that you work out in the mornings. Is that true?
Do. Yes, I go to the Minneapolis Club, which is
you?
a perk of being the president of the Downtown Council. So I get there pretty early and get my workout in and head to the office. So it's a good way to start the day.
Are you a runner?
I used to be a runner, and then my knees kind of went on. So I do the stationary bike, which kind of is close to that running sensation without wear and tear on the knees.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I also work out every morning.
Yes.
And I feel like that's when I have some moments of clarity and I like to plan my day. And
Yeah.
I'm assuming that happens for you as well.
Well, and plus I gain a reputation for sending emails like at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, which is like really impressive to people.
Wow, he's on it. I know, guilty. Mine's more of a text message thing, but yeah, we have someone in our office too that also sends out the emails at 4 in the morning.
3:30, 4, all the things.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, thank you again for joining us,
My
and
pleasure.
I'll let Hans kind of,
Okay.
I'll chime in as needed.
Great.
But
Well, Steve, welcome. I'll just jump right in. There's been a lot of, just lots going on downtown in our environment, whether it's a little bit of social unrest, whether it's the pandemic going on. Heather mentioned some challenges with leasing. Your thoughts on just the state of state of Minneapolis? Where are we at in your opinion? What are you seeing for concerns? And just a quick overview would be really interesting.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that, Hans. I mean, it's been like 18 months that none of us have ever experienced before. So kind of start with that. But the combined impact of COVID and the public health pandemic with the murder of George Floyd and everything that ensued from that heinous act has really been hard for our community to kind of come to grips with, honestly. Mm-hmm. So I think the first reaction I had is just trying to understand what we need to do to try to improve things for everybody who lives in our community.
Sure.
And that's a work in progress, has been for decades, and
Sure.
will be for decades more, but we have to make that commitment. At a more kind of practical level for downtown, my kind of day job,
Mm-hmm.
it really has meant that the downtown economy has been kind of knocked flat, especially in those early months after the initial stay-at-home order in March of 2020. We're gradually coming back.
Yeah.
We're seeing more and more office workers coming back. Events are back this year, both pro sports, live entertainment. More of the restaurants are able to find that customer base to reopen.
Sure.
But it's still going to be a long process. And even at the end of that process, the downtown economy that we knew pre-COVID is not going to be the same downtown economy.
Sure.
So we're going to kind of go through a process of reset and reinvention in the coming years.
Yeah, as a organization that we've been in the downtown market for 30 plus years, and we're seeing that as well.
Yeah.
So that sounds very familiar. Do you see a path? You mentioned it's a long road ahead of us. Short term, what are you seeing short term?
Well, I think short term, through this year and into maybe the second quarter of next year, I think the big preoccupation for us anyway will be trying to help nurture the back to office process.
Sure.
Restoring that core CBD customer base that is composed of office workers is really important to the ancillary businesses downtown, restaurants, retail, and the like. If you look at the residentially based areas of our downtown, North Loop, it's like, okay, whatever happened? It's kind of back
Booming,
to
right?
where it was, right?
Literally booming almost.
But not true in the core because of that kind of
Absolutely.
that lack of office workers. So trying to nurture that process along, I think, for the next 6 months. Unfortunately, the Delta variation kind of knocked out what we expected to be a
Right.
little bit of a spike around Labor Day, so it's going to be a longer, flatter curve, but we do have to nurture that along.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be the next 6 months of work.
What are your thoughts on the safety component? Again, we've been downtown. We've been classified as a firm that can work through the pandemic. So we're probably 65% in the office, 40%, and whatever that mix is. Really, flexibility has been a new thing for us, and I think many others too, from that work from home, quote unquote. But a lot of things we're concerned with. This is the safety, from our staff, from our the projects we're working on. Comments or feedback on what are you guys seeing and hearing out there?
Hearing the same thing. I mean, if it's not COVID safety, it's physical safety and the perceptions of what's happening and the reality of what's happening downtown. I mean, we've never been, and I've never been one to just deny that there are safety issues downtown.
Sure, of course.
There certainly are.
Like any city.
Like any city,
Yeah.
right. And we have to deal with those, and through the Downtown Improvement District, part of our operation, we're a great partner with law enforcement, with community organizations, just a really holistic approach to public safety downtown that the business community believes in and invests in through DID. But it's also true that the kind of the reality of crime stats down compared to the last 4-year average. The reality that most of the more visible incidents tend to occur in a limited geography at a specific time of day. You know, warehouse district, bar close, a challenging time, but so that reality is surrounded by a really outsized perception of unsafe conditions downtown that do get in the way of employers bringing their folks back.
Sure.
So that's providing information and chipping away at that perception, in part by people just coming back and experiencing downtown and saying, oh, it's not what I thought, is what we have to work on over these next months.
Sure. I won't pretend to know all the details inside our city council. We spend a lot of time downtown Minneapolis, but I've heard a lot of pieces of the police staffing. You have some other ideas and concepts from the city council. What are your thoughts on what are you hearing from business leaders and to that context?
Well, again, the
balance between what's right and wrong.
Absolutely. Well, I hear a couple things, and not only from business leaders, but throughout my career when I've done other things, including neighborhood redevelopment.
Sure. Safety
is just fundamentally important to a healthy neighborhood or a healthy downtown community. And our conception of safety, is different, and that's been part of the debate that we've had over these last months since the murder of George Floyd. But I think for the business community, it is a comprehensive approach, as I've said, and businesses put their money where their mouth is in that respect to DID. But law enforcement is a critical part of it, and not status quo law enforcement. I mean, MPD needs to change and reform. We think the chief is the right person to lead that change. But we do need a robust force, and we don't have that today. We have a depleted force, both in terms of numbers and I think in terms of kind of spirit, and that needs to be rebuilt. Yeah,
we experienced that myself and a coworker. We were at a job site a few blocks down, actually right across from the U.S. Bank Stadium, and middle of the day type of thing. And it was a pretty, I won't go with those details, but it was a heated moment where some confrontational could have went in a really negative way. It was a spot that I personally have not been in. I've been downtown for 24 years, and a challenge. And we did call the police, trying to get some help, and I think they're understaffed. I think, in my opinion,
dramatically.
How they're trying to figure out which calls to answer to, but it was a good and bad. It was good to experience it myself, and then see what our employees are going through potentially and our work staff as well. So we've got a lot of work to do, but hopeful that we're going to find the right path for everybody here. About a year and a half ago, you mentioned some concerns with firms either deciding to go downtown, maybe not going downtown, or making different decisions. Thoughts on that, or what are you seeing trend-wise?
Right, a year later.
Yeah.
We did work with most of the active commercial office brokers downtown late last summer to try to get a handle on, because we were hearing, people are going to flood out of downtown, so trying to get a handle on what that really meant.
Yep.
And absolutely, it was true that a number of companies that had leases coming up in the foreseeable future, which, as you know, for a company might mean 2 or 3 years. That's the planning horizon.
Yes.
We're kicking the tires on what other locations might mean for them. I think the temperature on that has gone down in my view, but we still have the work to do to make sure people perceive downtown and experience downtown as being safe, to kind of get beyond the COVID limitations that are affecting the vibrancy of downtown.
Sure.
And to make sure that downtown is a good long-term location for companies that, frankly do have options, but decided to come downtown for good and valid reasons, and we need to restore those reasons.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you that the energy that we're seeing as a service provider in the market is that there are some of those larger corporations that are making Deluxe, for example, making a really big change from Shoreview, for decades and decades, making a really interesting decision to come downtown, and we're hopeful that's a great decision for them, of course. But not only that, but just the building amenities. They're doing a lot of amenity spaces, interesting enough, where there's not, there are partial staff, there may be 30% or 25 or 40% staff depending on the building, but they're investing in the building, which is a positive thing to see for us.
Well, I am hearing that amenity package in a building is just going to be key to success. There's going to be, as one person put it, kind of a flight to quality in terms of office space.
Sure.
And so that'll be good for many of our buildings, but for others, maybe it'll mean there needs to be some consideration of what a future use might be.
So I'm going to change subject a little bit. The 2025 plan, can you enlighten us on what that is? You guys shared some goals of, a while ago.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that the Downtown Council has done historically over the years is every 10, 15 years really gathered up a wide range of stakeholders and thought deeply about what do we need to do to keep our downtown economically and socially healthy, competitive with other areas. The current version of that plan is the Intersections 2025 plan that was published in the fall of 2011. So we're more than halfway through that time horizon. And it established 10 goals, including doubling the downtown residential population, where we've made great progress. And I think it's served our downtown well, especially during these last 18 months when the business section kind of feels softer. But also addressed issues like homelessness, greening up downtown, some check off the box goals like redoing Nicollet, building a new NFL stadium, improving transit access to downtown. So just a variety of things that would again serve the competitiveness and the vibrancy of downtown as a place to live or work or visit.
So you're feeling good. We're tracking as a community.
Tracking well on those goals, and I think actually when we kind of get through this this period of getting to whatever the new reset for our downtown economy is, sometime next year, it'll be time to gather people up and start looking out another 15, 20 years. So we'll get that planning process going next year probably.
Pandemic.
Yes.
It's been a roller coaster for all of us, or many of us, I think, up and down. It changes not only by the day, it seems, but literally by the hour, by the minute. How has your team, your staff been affected by it, let alone our community, our downtown?
Yeah.
Thoughts? I mean, it's a big talk. It's a big discussion.
Right. Well, at a practical level, like Greiner, our downtown improvement district operation was deemed to be an essential service. So literally our DID program, the most visible part are the ambassadors downtown, missed exactly 1 week.
Wow.
So they've been out ever since.
That's
kind of trying
incredible,
to have a sense of, or create a sense of normalcy during this really abnormal time.
Kudos, that is in this day and age, it's really remarkable.
And that's meant I've been able to come downtown to the office. I felt justified. So I haven't missed a day myself. I did spend some time working at home in those first months, but I've sort of seen the good, the bad, the ugly of the last 18 months. And for the rest of our staff, the office staff, it's been like most companies, a lot of remote work, and now we've transitioned into more of a hybrid model. Our offices are open, but being more flexible about when people are in the office and when they're looking.
If you had to guess, what's your staff look like from downtown or from the inside to work from home?
I think it's about any given day, probably about 50% of our staff.
50
in the office. Yeah, the office staff.
Okay. Just curious. Again, I'd like to know the data. And I would say before we're probably 65%, but again, we're definitely in a little bit different market too. We're in the weeds. We're physically building a product on sites, so it's a little bit tougher to do that from at home per se.
Absolutely.
Somebody's got to do the work at some point. So the actual physical.
I just remember my first kind of significant in-person meeting a few weeks ago, and it was like, boy, I just now remember how much you can accomplish in those first 5 minutes when people are gathering, and those last 5 minutes when people are leaving. You just can't do on a Zoom call.
Yeah, we actually, Heather and I were at a meeting yesterday and experienced the same thing. Very similar to this. It's refreshing to see people in person, have those engagements, and actually some good discussion from the beginning to the end is refreshing for sure. I'm going to switch subjects a little bit. PPL, you mentioned homelessness briefly here.
Yes.
Definitely a passion of yours. Give me some background on that. Why so passionate? How did you get involved with it?
Yeah. Well, I trace it back really to I came here to go to graduate school at the university in 1979. Born and raised in Iowa, moved to other places, but
very cool. Where in Iowa?
Settled in Dubuque.
Okay,
right on
sure.
the river. Yeah. But settled here in '79 for graduate school, and my wife and I attended church at a kind of St. Francis Cabrini, which is in that southeast Minneapolis area, not too far from the university. And when the recession of 1980 hit, People remember that. I'm old enough to experience that now, unfortunately. That's when we really, in my memory, really saw an uptick in homelessness in our community. Economic conditions were bad, the state cut back on the general assistance program, so all of a sudden, especially individuals initially found themselves without resources. And so the response was kind of a network of church-based shelters, including one in our church.
Got it.
And my wife Debbie and I were volunteers at that shelter. So that got me involved. Became clear that overnight shelter in the church basement was better than nothing, but it wasn't a very good solution. And so the next step for our parish was to create a transitional housing program. And Debbie and I again were on the founding board of that program called St. Francis Cabrini House. And then it just kind of continued for me when I was at Project for Pride and Living. One of the things that we did was affordable housing, including for people that really wouldn't be successful in market housing for economic and social reasons. And so we did a lot of kind of special needs housing with partner agencies. One that I really remember, one of the first ones I worked on was called Anishinaabe Wakayagan, which we worked with the American Indian Community Development Corporation, and it was kind of a wet house where chronic alcoholics in the Native community could live. Didn't have to stop drinking, but they could live and be safe. And so that was a really meaningful project for me.
Wow. Is that South Minneapolis area?
South Minneapolis, just off Franklin Avenue.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Yeah. Incredible. And PPL, of course, is alive and well today. Busy as ever, I believe.
It was founded by a guy named Joe Savaggio, who was kind of a living legend, and then I ran it for 16, 17 years, and now they have a really competent executive director. A named Paul Williams is taking it in all new directions. So yeah, it's a strong, vital resource in our community.
Very cool. Homelessness in Minneapolis in general.
Yeah.
Improving, getting worse.
Yeah, getting worse.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not like. Well, I shouldn't say that.
Is it getting worse, or is it just more apparent?
It's
a good
blanket
question.
statement, Heather. Yeah. So let me backtrack and say, family homelessness is actually significantly reduced from where it was maybe even 5 years ago. So that's a good thing. And people serving people, which is one of the big shelters downtown, is one of the leading resources to help families not be homeless.
More stable.
Individual homelessness is trending up after many years of trending down, and I think that's a function of certainly COVID these last couple of years, these last 18 months or so, but then just generally kind of conditions in our society, and the prevalence of mental health challenges and addiction challenges within that population, and the lack of resources devoted to those issues in our society. I think that Hennepin County and Minneapolis have done a great job over these last 18 months kind of responding, largely by using hotel assets that were not being used.
Essentially vacant, yeah.
Exactly, to help house people and get them out of harm's way, especially during this public health pandemic. They've also invested in the shelter system. But at the same time, we see encampments, and we've had really challenging experiences with encampments over the last couple of years. So some good news, some not as good news, and overall a major challenge. The one thing I have to say though is that everything has to be a little bit relative. And so when I talk to people who come back from coastal markets or Denver, I mean, our challenge is just minuscule compared to what some of those other cities are doing.
I was going to ask or inquire a little bit, because we travel a little bit, of course, different with the pandemic going on, a little bit minimized, but whether it's Seattle, whether it's Denver, whether it's the coast, like you said. Definitely a different animal, I think, here, a different challenge we're having, but still, it's definitely more apparent.
To your point, Heather, about how more visible it is downtown, especially on Nicollet, especially at 9th and Nicollet, where my office is. Part of that is that that part of downtown has always been an element of the mix, right?
Sure.
It's just part of what downtowns are. But when there are fewer other activities going on, when the office worker population is way down, or last year when there were people coming for sporting events or concerts, then that part of downtown just really stood out. There's a little bit more of it, and it just stood out. So it's become more of an issue, I think, for people in terms of their evaluation of how they feel about downtown.
Right. I feel helpless, and I don't know how to help them. And I'm curious to know what your advice would be for either a person or a company like Greiner. How can we help?
Yeah. Well, one thing we say, and it's not without controversy, is that investing in agencies that really provide assistance, mental health, addiction, as opposed to responding to panhandling is the better way to go. That's our.
I needed to hear that.
Yeah, that's our view, and that's my view as somebody who actually devoted a fair amount of time in my career to programs that address the conditions that folks on the street are facing. Other people would dispute that, but that's how I see it. And most people I know who are really have dedicated their lives to this work feel the same way.
Thank you for sharing that. I think more people need to know that.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more organizations, or again, maybe it's on us that we're more prevalent from our relationships with the PPLs of the world, but whether it's YouthLink, whether it's a Vivo, they're definitely more front and center, at least in what we're seeing as residents or workers in the downtown market. And we're taking that as a positive. We're trying to help, we're trying to make an impact, but it's slow. It's a slow, for us, it feels very slow and challenging. There's so much, like, in my opinion, there's a lot of bureaucracy. There's so much red tape, so to speak. And how do we get, building? We're a builder, right? At the end of the day, we're a builder. Putting some relationships together, but we're a builder. We build things, and trying to balance out a developer with the need of a homeless family or individual is really difficult. Any advice? Any advice on how do we get through that, or is it just a never-ending scratch your head? How do we get? Because it just keeps on evolving to more and more regulation, maybe. But is it helpful? Is it truly helpful?
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say thank you as the board chair of YouthLink for the incredible work that Greiner did with YouthLink.
Thank you. We're really proud of that.
Creating it's a tractable issue, challenge, but having really high quality facilities like that you all can create with the right resources is certainly a positive step.
We believe so too.
It's our most rewarding work.
It is. 100%.
And there is something real to the notion of somebody who is experiencing life struggles, stepping into a quality physical environment, and that's sending a signal about their worth and value, which is an important part of the response, I think. So just what you do professionally when you link up with organizations like YouthLink and others is a huge contribution. And I think as individuals, all of evaluate the opportunities we have to invest our time and treasure in the lake, and for those who do zero in on that challenge, I think not getting discouraged and just kind of doing what we can do one foot in front of the other is important. Groups like ours and many others kind of work on the policy side of that to try to limit the barriers to success, but volunteers, I think, just engaging with people and being helpful, and again showing that all people in our society are valued. That's really important.
I love it.
Is there any other points that you want to get across or you feel like
Yeah, I know. I think we cover a lot of.
You did really good. Thanks for making our job really easy today. That was amazing. It's really
Well, it was
helpful,
great to get the questions in advance.
I know. One of my takeaways that I'm going to hold on to is when you mentioned your first in-person meeting and the conversations that you had before and after that are so important. It's a reminder, I think, to me and to people that people need to come back to the office. Then you have to have those conversations. You can't do it all remotely. There will be time, or there is. It means people need to come
I think so.
downtown.
Maybe I would just, as a closing comment on that point, we've been thinking about, and others have been thinking about, how do you try to prompt that? And our conclusion was it really does have to be an invitation. It's not like we can guilt people. Must come back downtown.
Come on down. We have all these amenities.
Your responsibility.
Right. I love, you also had a quote, I think, regarding IDS's new Crystal Court. And what a great job Acesso did to kind of revitalize and bring some energy back to the city. So if you could keep doing that, keep sending those positive.
Send those invitations out, and our experience so far has been, as people do come back down, even if they're a little hesitant or reluctant, they've had good experiences. And the people coming back to the Twins games have reported even though the team hasn't performed as well as I'd like, but the experience at Target Field and downtown has been positive. So as people put their toe back in the water, I think if we can help work to make that a positive experience, that'll begin to chip away at that perception and help with the
Promote that.
reanimation process.
Yeah, agreed.
Keep inviting.
Keep inviting.
Agreed.
Yep.
Keep inviting.
I love it. Well, thank you,
My
Steve
pleasure.
Cramer, so much again for your time. I appreciate it. And thanks for joining us for our in-practice session. Check out our website for more.